Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Right.
Today, we're going to be exploring a personality type through the lens of a pretty fascinating figure.
All right.
So we're talking about the Enneagram,
Okay.
and specifically the social six, through the life and career of Joseph Ratzinger,
Sounds good.
Pope Benedict XVI.
All right.
Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, isn't the Enneagram all about, like, self-discovery and personal growth?
Mhm.
So how does this really apply to someone in such a powerful position?
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to uncover today.
Yeah.
And we'll see how understanding the social six can really help us illuminate not just his life, but also the motivations and behaviors that we see all around us in the world.
I think what's so captivating about Joseph Ratzinger is that his life almost reads like a textbook example of the social six.
Okay.
Someone who seeks security and authority, structure, tradition.
Yeah. And, for our listeners who are really into the Enneagram, we know that the social six is all about those clear guidelines, like needing that sense of stability.
Right.
But what I find so fascinating is that it's not just about blind obedience.
Yeah.
It's more about this deep-seated yearning for order in a world that can often feel pretty chaotic.
Exactly. And you see this very clearly in Ratzinger's lifelong dedication to the Catholic Church.
Right.
It's more than just devotion. It's about finding a system of belief and a structure that gives you a sense of security, meaning in this really complex world.
Yeah, and his role as prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith,
Mm-hmm.
that really highlights this,
Right, absolutely.
Because that position is all about safeguarding Catholic doctrine.
It is. It's about upholding the rules and tenets of the church, defining the boundaries. And that kind of role aligns so perfectly with someone who thrives on structure, knowing where the lines are drawn.
Yeah, it's like his personality and his career were almost destined to intertwine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's his papacy,
Right.
where he really focused on preserving those traditional values and doctrines, even when, there was a lot of pressure to modernize.
Yeah. Right. And that resistance to change is a classic social six trait.
Okay.
It's not about being stuck in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but more about really valuing what's known, what's established as a way to maintain that stability, that order.
So it's not just blindly following the rules, like there's a deep thought process behind it.
Absolutely.
And, let's be honest, Ratzinger was known for his intellect.
Yes.
And that really methodical, almost systematic way that he approached governing the church.
Absolutely. His writing's incredibly dense,
Yes.
meticulously crafted.
Yes.
There's a clear emphasis on logic and reason in his work.
Mm.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, for a social six. Those intellectual pursuits almost become a haven.
Yeah.
It's a way to make sense of the world, to create order out of the complexity.
That's a great point. It's like by building these intricate theological frameworks, he was also creating a sense of security and stability for himself.
Exactly. Knowledge becomes a refuge.
Yeah.
A way of managing the inherent uncertainty of life.
Okay, so we're seeing how all these pieces fit together, like his adherence to authority, his love of structure, his need for stability, all very, very consistent with the social six.
Right.
But I am curious about his resistance to change and reform within the church.
Okay.
Was that also tied to his personality?
It certainly seems that way. Ratzinger was known for opposing theological and liturgical reforms that he perceived as threats to the stability of the church. He preferred the Latin Mass traditional practices that represented a connection to the past,
Yeah.
a sense of continuity.
And his critique of relativism.
Yes,
That idea that there are no absolute truths really stands out to me,
of course.
because that must have felt incredibly threatening to someone who values those clear-cut guidelines.
Absolutely. For a social six, ambiguity feels like chaos.
Yeah.
They yearn for those universal truths, those solid foundations, and Ratzinger's worldview reflected that need for certainty.
Okay, so we've established that social sixes are socially oriented. But then you have someone like Ratzinger, who even as Pope had this very reserved,
Yeah,
contemplative side.
right.
It seems a bit paradoxical.
Well, that's the fascinating duality of the social six. They might be drawn to communities and groups, but they also need a lot of space for introspection.
Right.
And remember, Ratzinger ultimately resigned from the papacy
He did.
and chose a life of prayer and reflection. That decision speaks volumes about his internal world.
Yeah, you're right. It really does challenge our preconceived notions about, like, introversion and extroversion.
It does.
Speaking of intriguing comparisons, though, Isn't there a compelling parallel between Ratzinger and the philosopher Immanuel Kant?
Oh, absolutely.
They both seem to embody this social six type in different ways.
They do. Kant's another figure who's often associated with the social six, and when you look at their core beliefs, it's remarkable how much they share in common.
Right. They both emphasized universal moral principles.
Yes.
For Kant, it was his categorical imperative.
Right.
For Ratzinger, it was his defense of Catholic orthodoxy.
Right.
They were both, in their own way, speaking the same language.
They were.
And that intolerance for ambiguity that we've been discussing, it's present in both of them.
Absolutely.
And it led them to adopt these very structured and systematic approaches in their respective fields.
They did.
It really makes you wonder, how can these personality tendencies manifest in such diverse ways,
Right.
depending on a person's life path?
It's fascinating.
This is what I find so captivating about the Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
It's like holding up a mirror not just to ourselves, but to the world around us.
I agree, and it really does highlight how these underlying personality patterns can weave their way through history and shape individuals in profound ways. And speaking of patterns, we were talking earlier about Ratzinger finding refuge in knowledge.
Right.
I think this deserves further exploration because for the social six, it's not just about accumulating facts. It's about using those facts to build a sense of order and predictability in a world that can often feel unpredictable, right? Precisely. It's about creating those mental frameworks that can help manage anxiety and provide a sense of stability. And we see this so clearly in Ratzinger's intellectual journey.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't simply a theologian.
Right.
He was a prolific scholar who delved deep into these complex theological concepts.
And his writing style really reflects that, doesn't it?
It does.
It's incredibly structured, systematic, almost as if he's carefully constructing a logical framework
Yes.
to support every argument.
That's a great observation, I think. By creating these intellectual systems, he was, in a way, creating a sense of order and stability for himself. Knowledge becomes a sort of anchor in the face of uncertainty.
So it's not just knowledge is power,
Right.
but perhaps knowledge is security for the social six.
I like that. It really captures the essence of how they approach learning and intellectual pursuits.
But, we have to acknowledge that Ratzinger's intellectual rigor also led to some very firm stances,
Yes.
particularly regarding his views on morality and what he termed relativism.
That's true. His aversion to ambiguity, which we discussed earlier, really manifested in his strong opposition to any form of moral relativism.
Right.
He believed in those absolute truths, those clear-cut distinctions between right and wrong, which provide a framework for understanding a complex world.
And this wasn't just some abstract philosophical debate for him.
Right.
It had very real implications for his role in shaping church doctrine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he was tasked with upholding those teachings, and he did so with unwavering conviction. There was no room for compromise when it came to matters of faith and morals for him.
This brings us back to that fascinating comparison with Immanuel Kant.
It does.
Both men were profoundly dedicated to those universal moral principles.
Yes.
To this idea that certain truths transcend individual opinions or cultural norms.
Right. It is striking how two figures, separated by centuries and operating in vastly different spheres, arrive at such similar conclusions. It suggests that those core personality tendencies, those deep-seated needs for structure and certainty, can manifest in surprisingly consistent ways across time and context.
So as we delve deeper into this idea of Joseph Ratzinger as a case study in the social six personality, what would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the most significant takeaway is recognizing the profound influence of personality.
Okay.
It shapes how we perceive the world, how we relate to others, and how we make decisions, even at the highest levels of leadership.
And in Ratzinger's case, his social six tendencies, his need for authority, that love of structure, his aversion to ambiguity were all integral to who he was and the path he forged.
Exactly. And while we might not always agree with his choices or perspectives, understanding his motivations through the lens of the Enneagram allows for a more nuanced and empathetic view. It reminds us that even figures like Ratzinger, who held such immense power and influence, were ultimately driven by those same basic human needs and desires that we all experience.
It's like we've been given a glimpse behind the curtain, a chance to see the inner workings of a complex mind, and how those inner workings shaped a life and a legacy. It's been an insightful journey, and I think it speaks to the power of the Enneagram. to help us understand not just ourselves, but also the world around us.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing the beauty of human complexity, understanding the tapestry of motivations that drive us all.
This deep dive has been a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to discover about ourselves and the people around us. But for now, we've reached the end of our exploration into the world of Joseph Ratzinger and the social six personality. You know, it feels like we've been on this incredible journey,
We have.
peeling back the layers of a complex figure like Ratzinger. It makes you realize just how much personality can really influence the course of history.
It really does. It's a good reminder that even those in positions of great power are still human, driven by those fundamental needs and desires just like the rest of us.
And for Ratzinger, those needs for security, clarity, and order were really amplified
Yeah.
by both his personality and his role in the church. It's almost as if his whole life was a testament to those core values.
It makes you think about how those social six tendencies might have both helped and hindered him in navigating the challenges of leadership, especially in a world that was undergoing such rapid change.
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradox.
It is.
On the one hand, his adherence to tradition
Right.
and that strong sense of duty provided a sense of stability for the church. It was like an anchor in really turbulent times.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you could also see it as inflexible, even resistant to necessary reforms.
Right.
It's that classic tension between preserving what's been and adapting to what's coming.
And it's a tension that so many institutions face,
They do.
especially those with long histories and deeply rooted traditions like the Catholic Church.
Absolutely. The church has always grappled with balancing its core principles with the evolving needs of its followers and the changing world around it.
And I think it's safe to say that Ratzinger's personality, his very essence as a social six, played a significant role in how he navigated that tension.
No doubt about it. His aversion to ambiguity and that preference for clear-cut answers probably made it difficult for him to embrace change or to navigate the gray areas that inevitably arise in modern life.
But even with those challenges, it's clear that his intellect and his unwavering commitment to his beliefs left a lasting impact on the church and on the world.
Love him or disagree with him, he was a figure who commanded attention and respect.
His legacy is undeniably complex, just like the man himself. But by understanding him through the lens of the Enneagram, we gain a deeper appreciation for what motivated him, the internal forces that shaped his life and his decisions.
And that's what makes the Enneagram such a powerful tool. It's not about putting people in boxes or judging them.
Right.
It's about understanding those patterns of human behavior and motivation in all their complexity.
It's about seeing the world and the people in it with a little more empathy and understanding.
It's about recognizing those patterns that drive us, those fears and desires that shape our choices, and how those deeply personal elements interact with the world around us.
As we conclude this deep dive into the world of Joseph Ratzinger and the social six personality, I hope you've gained some new insights. We've explored not just a historical figure, but the power of personality to influence history and the lives of individuals.
And maybe it's even sparked some self-reflection along the way. After all, each of us has our own Enneagram type, our own set of core motivations and fears, and understanding those patterns can be incredibly valuable for personal growth and for building stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
So as you go about your day, keep those insights in mind. Pay attention to the people around you. Think about what motivates them. See if you can spot any familiar patterns. You might be surprised by what you discover.
And who knows, maybe this deep dive has inspired you to explore the Enneagram further and uncover those hidden depths within your own personality. It's a journey of self-discovery that can be both enlightening and empowering.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those minds open.